And you're welcome to the RTÉ Rugby Podcast. Delighted to have you with us ahead of the third test this weekend. The Lions and South Africa finally poised at one test each after two games. Donal, Lenihan and Jackman are with me to look ahead to the weekend. Donal, look, it's a weird one in a way because I think, maybe a couple of weeks before the first test started, we'd said things would be finally balanced at one test each going into the last against the world champions. We'd all be very excited. Yet, I don't think I've actually witnessed so much apathy and disappointment about the rugby that's been played over the last couple of weeks. It is 1-1, but we're hoping for change this weekend, are we not?
Yeah, we certainly are. Obviously, you're picking up the feeling there at home. It's a little different out here. Springboks supporters don't care how they win. They're thrilled at the fact that it's 1-1. They think the rugby is brilliant. Yeah. Every time they see a scrum going backwards, a maul being driven 20 yards, they're cheering and roaring. So slightly different. But look, I think we just have to take a step back from that first. I mean, this is our last podcast of the year, the longest rugby season in all time. I was thinking we covered, Leinster-Munster on the 22nd of August in the Aviva, the comeback game. Season has begun. It's almost a year. When you think about it from the play, it's bad enough talking about it and covering it. Imagine playing for that length of time. It's been such a strange year in so many ways. So it's fitting in a way that it's ending with a game that everybody is just in their heads about. I mean, it should be, as you say, a celebration of rugby. It'll be 12 years before the Lions will be back here in South Africa. The fact that once again it's happening in a stadium where there won't be anybody there. It's the fifth game in a row. Put it in the context of the Lions tour. The fifth game in a row that the Lions play in the Cape Town Stadium. So, you think of yourself as a player away on the Lions, you're on tour. But like that stadium, it might as well be a home stadium to them. They've seen nothing else or played nowhere else, only that stadium. So, sorry, I'm just putting the game into context.
Well, hang on. There it is, Bernard Jackman. There it is. I never thought I'd see the day on the record where Donal Lennon says, I'm shit sick of talking about rugby, but COVID this year has done it to him. We've finally broken it.
Absolutely, Rob. Look, I feel your pain, Donal. But you mentioned Cape Town and 5 games in a row, Cape Town Stadium. I mean, it's a South African winter there, and the pitch started to tear up last week. I mean, how's it been this week? Has there been much rain? Would you sense that the pitch will further deteriorate, and that might stop the Lions playing this type of attacking rugby that probably have to play to get a win?
Yeah, look, it is a big factor. There's no doubt about that. No, we've been lucky. I mean, I've been in Cape Town numerous times over the years. In the good days, when you were able to get the ferry out to Robben Island or get up Table Mountain, there was always rain. They were always cancelled. We've had 2 days of rain in the last 3 weeks. It's been extraordinarily dry, which is just as well because the pitch, as you alluded to, the Cape Town Stadium was built in 2010 for the Soccer World Cup. So it's a mixture of, it's a sand-based grass. I mean, even last week before the in the warm-up for the games, both sets of both opposition were scrummaging against a full pack on either end of the pitch, and the pitch was just churning up before you. So every time there's a break in play, or certainly half time, the groundsmen are over the forks. But I think the Springboks are giving out about it more than the Lions on the basis that they feel they can't get proper traction from a scrummage point of view, and they feel, had the pitch been better, they would even be more dominant. So maybe the Lions, they might be happy with what they have, but it is a factor.
Gats might have to make a video next week about groundsmen, 60 minutes on.
Exactly.
Well, look, whatever about the weather, right? And a reprieve by all accounts from Donal, about how normally is this time of year. Bernard, we can't blame the pitch for the absolute rubbish the Lions have been playing for the last 2 test matches. And I'm not overstating this here, because I'm telling you now, of the 3 halves of test rugby that we've seen, the second half of the first test, the only time I actually sat up and thought, oh, here we go, this is actually an interesting game to watch. 40 minutes of rugby, which kind of amass over about 4 hours the way the game has gone, have been absolutely putrid from the Lions.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that they're going to have to rectify to win this weekend. It's nearly impossible to see them being able to beat the Boks at their own game, which they tried to do last week. And I could see the thought process in that, because they had effectively they'd won a first test without really having to open up. And if you think about the game, the way the game finished, and the second half was obviously more impressive or more dominant in the first test. It was with Conor Murray and Farrell playing pragmatic rugby. So, you know, in test 2, Gatland probably felt, look, that's the way to just win the series. The problem is now the Boks have found their power game. They seem to be more match fit. And I don't think the Lions can match them playing that way. So I think Gatland has to gamble and potentially, you know, you see Ali Price come back in. That's a sign that they want to play more tempo. Finn Russell on the bench. They've obviously brought Josh Adams in, and Ian Williams, who were probably brought in to solve the high ball issue. But also, in fairness to both of them, they have attacking prowess in their own right. The big question for me is, can we get the ball to the width? You know, and that's nothing against Bundy and Robbie. I think both of them are very good centres. But unfortunately, this tour, we haven't had that second playmaker that you need to get around that rush defence, Hugh. And we're not the first team to get caught by it, and we won't be the last. But I think we have been very conservative. You know, for Dan Biggar to only touch the ball 3 times in a game in the second test. And, like, it's not as if we didn't have any possession. We had. We have become very one-out focused and a hell of a lot of kicking. And realistically, I think if we don't change, you know, the result is going to be a comprehensive win for the Boks, because I don't think we can handle them at what they do. So I'm really excited and hope that we do elaborate a little bit. And if not, Gregor Townsend is going to be seen as this tour is going to be seen as a big black mark against his attacking prowess, to be honest.
Well, I tell you, to pick even Donal, like, you know, and look, we'll go into the changes that have been made for the third test in a couple of minutes' time. But just on Gregor Townsend here, I hope whatever fee the Lions are paying him for attack coach is going to be handed back at the end of this thing, because I have not the first idea about the team that was picked to go out for the second test and the men that were asked to fill the positions, particularly the back 3, and the rugby that transpired over the course of the 80 minutes. It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. I mean, it isn't as if the Lions didn't know when that Lions coaching team sat down for their first selection meeting months ago, you know, and that's a process that will go on over a series of months. But the one thing in terms of picking a squad is you will say, okay, how are we going to beat South Africa, and what type of players do we need to do that? Because you have that luxury in a Lions context, because you're picking the best of 4 home countries. To go back to Bernard's point in terms of the rush defence, the line speed that South Africa play at, they defend narrowly, there is space available out wide. So therefore, you would think, no, you know, that you take that into consideration when you're putting your attacking plan together. But the bottom line is there hasn't been an attacking plan. That is the biggest indictment of the series. When Birch was talking there about Dan Biggar, 3 touches, he passed the ball 3 times in the 160 minutes of the game. Now, bear in mind that apparently the ball was only in play 30 minutes, 30 seconds. On average, you're talking 34, 35 minutes. And that was over a period of 116 minutes, not the normal 80 minutes. So it is turgid stuff. And again, so therefore, in terms of the way you're going to beat that defensive system, we've seen no evidence of it. And I think that has been compounded more by the fact there's a consistency with 9 selections throughout the test series. In other words, 9 players will be starting their 3rd test, okay? 5 of those 9, are, by the way, are in the back 5. The second row and back row have been constant throughout the series. But we now have our 3rd different centre combination for the test series, which shows you, you know, the centre combination is. They have reverted to 2/3 of the back 3 that everybody felt should have been there for the first test anyway. But the bottom line is they don't seem to have the capacity to challenge that drift defence or that. On that,
Donal, on the drift defence, do you think that Warren Gatland had in mind Owen Farrell to play outside Binger as that 10-12 two-player competition, and because of Owen Farrell's lack of form, that his plans went out the window, essentially, that Owen Farrell all of a sudden became unpickable because of the way he's playing?
Yeah, I think there was an element to that. I think Robbie Henshaw was kind of nailed on at 13. He was always going to start in the centre. Farrell, he brought him in, if memory serves me right, going back to the first game against Japan, I think he utilised that opportunity off the bench, bringing in the second playmaker. But it hasn't happened. It never developed from there. And that is a concern, because how else are you going to go? Look, I mean, Bernard is the coach. There's three ways. You try and get outside it, you try and go through it, or you go over it. There is space in behind that drift defence that the Lions haven't been able to exploit at all. We've seen, the try, the disallowed try that Robbie Henshaw had last week. I mean, I know that was only 5 meters out, but that was a perfect example of the space that's in behind those grubber kicks. There's an opportunity there to try and break that defensive system. But the Lions haven't been, I think in some ways, when you look back at the provincial games, they were scoring tries for fun. It was almost too easy, but they were breaking down defences after 3 phases. And that bore no resemblance whatsoever to the way South Africa play. So they found themselves in the middle of an arm wrestle that they haven't been able to win, and they haven't produced an alternative, which I think will be an indictment of the coaching staff. And this whole series is over because without any in-depth analysis, you know exactly what the Springboks were going to present to you before you came out here, and nothing has changed. And they have failed miserably in terms of the way to try and deal with that. I mean, to date, in the 2 tests, the Lions have scored 1 try, Cowan Dickey, off a 10-meter line-out maul. That's been it.
Yeah. And the back three, Bert, like just in terms of, the selection of the tactics, I don't know how you beat that defence, given the way the Lions have been set up to play. But, the back three that were in Gatland selected, I remember the first test, you and I were speaking about this and saying, right, he's picked Hogg, he's picked Duhan van der Merwe, and he's picked Watson. Ergo, they're going to try and play some ball, because they're not a defending kicking back three as such. Like, if you wanted a defensive kicking back three, you could have picked Liam Winans, you could have picked Jones. That's not the back three that kind of aligns itself with a defensive-minded kicking game. Yet that's exactly what's transpired. It's bizarre in ways, isn't it?
Absolutely. And people will say, they didn't get a chance to counterattack. But the problem was, because of what the Lions did on their own ball, they kicked it away to the box, and then hence the box kicked it back, and they exploited that weakness in the air that we saw last week. And I actually thought Anthony Watson was unlucky. I would have went with Liam Williams, Josh Adams, and Anthony Watson again. I thought he was the best of the 3 of them last week, but there seems to be a big push for Duhan van der Merwe. I think, speaking to some Springbok friends of mine, they see him as a massive weakness. They really,
I think everybody does at this stage.
I know. I look, maybe he has ability for sure going forward. He's powerful, but I think power is probably the least important factor against the Boks.
On the wing.
Yeah, well, exactly, on the wing, because they don't fear power. What they fear potentially is real speed, real cunning, someone with footwork. So I don't think he's the right weapon for this opposition. But look, he's in there.
Yeah. But when you think about it, Bert, sorry, I think one of the reasons Van der Merwe was there earlier on in the series was Gatland was, because he is so big. He's 6'4", he's 17 stone. He was actually using him off the wing almost as the guy who was going to get the Lions over the gain line. And then you're keeping Robbie Henshaw and, say, Elliot Daly, as it was, off that and play off that. But even now, like Bundy Aki has been brought in, if you like, that's one of the roles that he's been brought into play. So therefore, why persevere with Van der Merwe?
Yeah, it's a bizarre one. And I think there's huge pressure on his shoulder, on his shoulder. It's a very difficult scenario for him, given like he wasn't great last week. He hasn't a huge amount of experience at the top level, European finals, Grand Slam deciders, etc. And now he's coming into a test game to win a series, in a game where he's going to be targeted with high balls, which isn't his strength. So look, it's a leap of faith from Townsend and Gatland. But I agree with you, Donal. I think the selection hasn't made sense the whole tour. Even not bringing someone like Henry Slade or Gary Ringrose, as an option. Like, let's be honest, it's highly likely they plan to play Elliot Daly in a test match at 13. It was the second time he played 13 in a test match in 5 years. So there's been lots of inconsistencies that, if we don't win, will be used to point a finger at the coaching staff. So, the Springbok players responded to Rassie Erasmus and gave him a performance. I think Gatland needs the team to come out fighting for him this weekend, because I think there's a lot of areas you could criticize them in terms of how they prepared.
And Donal, I'm kind of, scratching my head here saying, how is this team that he's going to select, change things to such a degree that we're going to see, an entirely different match from last weekend? It does seem like South Africa are only getting stronger and getting fitter and more assured of themselves, where perhaps the Lions, and you mentioned at the very start of this podcast, Donald, how long a season it's been, let alone for us talking about. Imagine for the players who must be out on their feet with pre-season, even before that Leinster-Munster game, pre-season dating back to this month. So essentially they're playing for over 12 months non-stop. And I just wonder, have they anything left at this stage?
Well, I tell you, Hugh, in my experience over a long number of years in touring, the final week of a tour is always difficult at the best of times because, you have players, even the players who were involved in the series, it's inevitable that your mind drifts because, when the game is over on Saturday, that's the end of the season. Your mind can drift to going on holidays with your family, for example, on getting back. And I think even this tour, given the difficulty surrounding it, I mean, as I say, look, we had a beautiful day around the Cape here yesterday. We visited South African Rugby Union. As I said, they brought us out. You're looking at the beauty of the place. The players have seen absolutely nothing. They're 6 weeks in South Africa. They've now been 4 weeks in the same hotel in Hermanus. It's on a golf course, but it's like, what do you do all day? So I think the mental approach to this game is going to be absolutely huge. And the players who aren't involved in the testing, there's a big role for them to play. You can imagine how disappointed somebody like, say, Tyke Byrne, came off the bench. He's had a brilliant tour. He's come off the bench only 10 minutes and 7 minutes. And now he finds himself out of the match day 23. You look at Ian Henderson, who's had a fantastic tour, was given the opportunity to captain the Lions in one of the games, which is a huge honour. Yeah. And now he sees Adam Baird is on the bench ahead of him. I mean, that's a real kick in the teeth to him. So mentally, how the Lions, how their camp approaches this during the week is absolutely huge. On the flip side, you have South Africa. Will they be able to get up, like it was do or die for them last week? Will they be able to get up to the heights that they undoubtedly reached and all that? If you like, the fact that Rassie put himself out there, they had to respond and deliver a performance for their coaching team because he went out on a limb, and you can argue the merits or otherwise of that, but it worked for South Africa. So you have all those issues. And the last one, which I look, as I said all along, I think the Lions have had more competitive advantages in this tour than they've ever had before. No travel, didn't have to play in altitude. And the key one is injuries. I doubt if it has ever happened before that the Lions have got to the third test, the final game of the tour, where everybody was available for selection. Yeah, it's in my memory, it's never happened. Not only that, on the flip side, South Africa have lost two of their three most influential players in Faf de Klerk and Pieter-Steph du Toit. Then there was a suggestion that Duhan Vermeulen would come back into the team, but he's just not fit enough. So that's another kick, if you like. So they're down some of their key players. The Lions have had a full deck to select from. They have tweaked the bench a bit. I mean, I think the selections of Sam Simmons, who for me has had an ordinary tour, I have to say, and Finn Russell, at least the fact, he does bring that bit of X factor. Had you not included him on the bench for this one, you'd wonder why they would have picked him in the first place. But there is something different there from the Lions. But the key is, will they be still in the mix for the game in that last 25 minutes when you'll be looking to those players to try and win the series for you?
Bernard has been dominated by talk over the match officials. Rassie Erasmus, I guess, following on from Warren Gatland's lead, where Gatland criticised Marius Jonker, the TMO. Rassie said, right, I see your criticism of Jonker, and I'll raise you this hour-long video thrown out to the public about everything that the Australian officials did wrong the last time. God love them. They must be in cold showers at the moment, after the treatment that was dealt out. This weekend, we have Mathieu Raynal. Now, the officials, again, are going to come into centre focus as they just do in a test match now, whether it's the Six Nations or down under. Given, I guess, it's a European referee, you might say, okay, first check to the Lions in terms of maybe how the referee, a breakdown referee, the scrum will be refereed. But equally, the top 14, which you know all about, is probably most akin to how South Africa want to play, which is a rough and tumble up front. How do you see Mathieu Raynal?
Look, I think that's a massive boost for the Boks, because Mathieu Reynald is very similar to most French referees, and they favour the team that goes forward. So he won't be worried about binds or angles, or hasn't been in his career so far, unless he picked up some things from the way the Boks finished the game last weekend at scrum time in particular, that was pointed out to him was illegal. He will favour them, and that's the big worry. It's just how the Lions scrum got dismantled, and also our line-out maul. I mean, it was so dominant, and obviously it was a rich source of penalties and territory for the Boks. So I think Mathieu Reynald's style of refereeing will suit the Boks, and unless the Lions can come up with a way of solidifying and being able to not give away penalties at scrum time, and being able to, I wouldn't say stop them all, but again, you know, you concede ground potentially, but not penalties. You know, it doesn't matter what they do in attack for me, Hugh, it'll be all over, you know. And you know, speaking of the changes in the team, I agree with Donal. I think the Boks have lost two unbelievably influential players, but I just thought it was interesting the way they've gone to a 5-3 split now, and Mornay Stain, you know, is 37 years of age, and he's back on the bench in case Andre Pollard's kicking doesn't get back to the level that it normally is, which, you know, he's missed a couple on this series, and you know, they're prepared for that, and yeah, I just think it's a sign. Like, Mornay Stain comes on, they're not going to open up. It's going to be bombs, area bombs, territory, goal kicking. So I think they feel they have the recipe now, and they're just going to go out and try and put it together again. And I agree about the emotion side. You know, Gatland has hinted at in the media. Sometimes he's seen teams in the past not being able to get back up to that level. I don't know. I think they have momentum. I think there's a test series on the line. You know, Donal spoke, you know, in South Africa. The fans are enjoying this. I mean, geez, if they're not up for it emotionally, you know, there's something wrong.
Absolutely. I think Ronald O'Gara still has Mornay Stain's head on a dartboard, Donal, after the last 9 starts in South Africa. But listen, in terms of, you know, the scrum, which Bernard just mentioned there, the game went on for 116 minutes last weekend in the second test. It was in play 30 minutes. Most of those minutes out of play, Donal, were over the scrum. I mean, how long does it take to get 16 lads to settle down, form a scrum, and actually put the ball in play now? Because it's getting to the stage where people are just being put off by this. It's a farce at the moment. Well,
it's a joke, but look, you know my thoughts on this. I've always said, and Birch mightn't like this, as a good technical coach himself, but I've always made the point, scrum coaches get about 25 minutes of live action in the week leading up to a test match. So therefore, you've got to make the scrum sound like rocket science. The way, the method with which a scrum is set at the moment, where the hooker stands arms up, the two props take about 30 seconds each to get their foot in the right position. The second rows are down on their knees. They bind with each other first for about 10 seconds. It takes them another 10 seconds to get off their knees. The two flankers then come in when they feel like it. And the number 8 spends his day catching their shorts at the back, pulling them backwards to try and propel them forward. It drives me bananas. I mean, just get in with it and get on with it. But the bottom line is the Boks have certainly rediscovered the art of the second drive in terms of the power that they're able to translate through it. Certainly Trevor Nkane, who was a tight head, a loose head originally, moved to tight head 3 years ago. Like, he came back on at loose head and did a big number on Kyle Sinclair when he came on. So there's no doubt that Lions front row have been put under massive pressure. The one little ace that they feel they have this time is Wyn Jones, the Scarlets and Welsh loosehead, who was the original selection for the first test, missed it because of a shoulder infection, missed the second test. He's back. Now, if that doesn't solidify the scrum early on, if the Boks still get a nudge with their ace card playing, then I think that's a massive psychological boost for South Africa. So, look, the scrum and the maul, I mean, Diager, I haven't seen a second row make as big an impact on a game as he did when he came off the bench last week. Came on at 55 minutes. The Lions line-out was dominant. South Africa were struggling because they'd lost that third option when Peter Steph Tutard went off, and originally they'd replaced him by Quagga Smith, who's about 6'1" maybe. The minute they got the third option back and they started winning lineouts, Then their maul came into play. But even more crucially for me, the Jager roamed, or he ruled the year off restarts. South Africa had been shocking on restarts up to that point. So his impact was massive. The big question now, though, is they've run out of second rows. Franco Mostert starts in the back row. So therefore, De Jager hasn't played a huge amount of rugby. He probably won't last 80 minutes. They'll have to put Mostert back into the second row. And they've two what they call fetchers over here, Van Straden and Quagga Smith, who are very good on the ground. But ideally, they would like that third, second row on the bench. So they are compromised in terms of injury. So, and as a consequence of that, are vulnerable. So I wouldn't be writing off the Lions. But again, I think the whole psychological energy is going to come from what happens in that set piece, from the maul. And Mathieu Reynal, as the referee, is going to play a huge role. The only thing I would wish for him, there was so many interventions from the TMO and the assistant referees last week. Ben O'Keefe, you could have heard him down in the waterfront here in Cape Town. He was so loud and so ferocious, as was Nick Berry. Mathieu Reynal was whispering in the background, and we were, Jesus, man, would you ever speak up so we could hear what you're saying? I hope as referee, he will give clear communication, which O'Keefe did, to be fair.
Yeah, and I hope they're just not, the referees aren't so just shell-shocked at the moment. They can actually make a decision in under 16 minutes every time they stop the play, because it's just getting a farce now at this stage. Rassie Erasmus, I think, you know, if they go and win this this weekend, Birch, won't give a damn what World Rugby throw at him in terms of fines for the video they put out. And I'm firmly of the view, and I know I'm kind of in the minority here. I heard calls that this is a disgrace, this is not rugby. I think he did what he had to do to get his team together, to bind them together, and they went and won the second test. So it absolutely worked, and I think hats off to him to do it. If World Rugby want to make an example of him, fine, but I'm not sure that he'll care. What I will say to you is, if Warren Gatland manages to pull this off this weekend, Birch, he will go down as the greatest Lion coach of all time, no question. And given his record, when his back has been against the wall, it wouldn't surprise me if the Lions managed to do it this weekend.
No, absolutely, no, it wouldn't. He definitely has it in him. I'm just wondering, has he kind of relinquished some of his old principles? And you know, he's come off a very tough period in Super Rugby with the Chiefs, where, you know, I think they didn't win a game in Super Rugby at Tora. He seems to have, look, it just from the outside here, I have no inside knowledge, but it seems he has relinquished some of the dominance he may have had in the past around selection. You know, that it was very much an open forum. And I've never seen Gatland show such inconsistency in selection. Like, so watching him in the previous Lions tour, okay, you know, he made a late change in second test in New Zealand and went with the Sexton Farrell second playmaker, and that worked. But like over the last 10 years with Wales, with the Lions, I've always seen, you know, where he was going, you know what I mean? And that's the question here. And look, if he pulls it off, I think it will be, despite all the fact, I agree with Donal, a lot of things have fallen in the Lions' favour, no tests at altitude, etc. But given how the second half went and how the Lions looked like ragball rovers, that last 30 minutes just completely fell astray, I think it would be a massive and look, he's a phenomenal coach regardless, but I think it would be the finest moment. Yeah.
No, he is, but I think, Donal, it almost would be his finest. If he could pull this off on what will be his last Lions tour as manager, as head coach, it would be quite something, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, I know Gat's going back to 1998. I've watched his growth and development. He came into an Irish setup, and God, it's so far long ago. Brian Ashton, the coach at the time, got shingles, couldn't coach the team. And so Gatty came in. Caddy had been doing a little bit around the scrum, contributing there. And in a matter of weeks, the two of us found ourselves at the head of the Irish thing when everybody else was falling away. And he's always been Camus personified. He's learned over the years. He made a couple of errors earlier on in his coaching career, as all coaches did. I think that he did learn to back himself. So I understand fully where Birch is coming from on this one. I mean, all the things in terms of the original Lions squad selection, in terms of the selection for the first test, we've heard this almost, you know, this selection by consensus, where all the coaches put in their team, and we'll see how many is common to all. And that's the starting point. That is alien to what Gatland would have done in the past. And as a consequence of that, I think we have seen this inconsistency in the selection of the team. But look, the bottom line is it all comes down now to 80 minutes. It's not going to be flamboyant. The Lions are still 80 minutes away from creating history. A Lions Test series is so difficult to achieve. I mean, they've only had 2 since the turn of the 19th century, or since 1900 here. They've had 2 Test series wins. That's how hard it is. But, you know, it's within touching distance. And look, go back 2001, we were in a similar position. It was 1-1. And there's times during the week that you worry, do the players, does it sink in how significant this moment is? They'll never get this back again. They'll never be in a position where they can create this history again. So therefore, you know, it's all or nothing. And I think Gatland will create that mentality this week. It's a question of whether they're going to be good enough to deal with that physical power that South Africa will bring.
Okay. Well, lads, it's been a pleasure. I am looking forward to it now after listening to both of you. I was a bit apathetic there this morning, but I'm very much looking forward to it, and I really hope the Lions do it. Donal, just before I let you go, any truth in the rumour that Tadhg Furlong has played so much golf, he's gone from a handicap of 28 to scratch in the last 3 or 4 weeks, no?
Well, I tell you one thing, he'd definitely take you at this stage. They've golf simulators and everything. So listen, well, I tell you, golf will be the least of Tadhg Furlong's problem. He's one of the mainstays. He's been the rock of that Lions scrum. For his sake, I think he's a fantastic character. Great achievement out of him. He's now 6 Lions Test starts in a row. You know, a phenomenal player, but so much rests on his shoulders, given that he is the only surviving member now of the front row that started the last couple of games.
His star has never been higher. His agents and his decision to turn down that first contact offer for the IRFU, I think, would prove to be a very savvy one. Gents, thank you so much for your time. Enjoy the third test. Talk to you soon.